Thank you very much, Jill, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. I will introduce Christopher a little bit later on in the presentation, where myself and him will be having a conversation about State of Maryland's experience with the Kainos Smart product. As Jill introduced me, my name is Rory Digby. I'm a sales manager for the Kainos Smart product. And in today's session, what I'd like to do is give you a quick overview of the Kainos Smart product, a little bit of background knowledge, go through a live demonstration of the functionality. Because of the limited time we have available today, I keep that at a relatively high level just to give you context for the dialogue between myself and Christopher. And then, as Jill said, at the end of the session, I will be picking up some questions from the audience that have been posted during today's presentation. So before we start thinking about or talking about the Kainos Smart product, I'd like to first analyze the reasons that you may wish to look at automation as a solution for your workday testing. And at this stage, I've visited with around 150 different organizations, all who are on Workday, and I've seen some common themes and desires coming through in terms of why they want to look at automation. The first one is always the most obvious one. The introduction of an automated testing product will save time and money over an existing manual process. For some organizations, there is a desire to improve the accuracy of their testing, so they're not happy with the amount or the coverage of the testing that they can currently achieve with a manual test team, and a product like Kainos Smart allows them to expand the scope of what they cover, and as well as that, cover it in a lot more detail. There's always a lot of pressure on the teams responsible for testing the Workday implementations, both during initial implementation and indeed post-go live with the twice yearly updates and in reaction to any configuration changes that organizations normally go through. The use of a product like Kainos Smart can ease the burden on those teams and allow them to spend that time on other work, like potentially looking at a new module in Workday and the implementation of that and the addition of it to their Workday implementation. And one theme that comes through from some organizations that I engage with is that based on that particular organizational structure, it's actually only the HR team that have the ability to do the testing of the Workday implementation, and the reason for that is because that's the only group within that organization who have the access to all of the data within the Workday tenant. Now, very often, because that's the HR department, testing is not the primary function, and there can sometimes be a lack of technical experience in regards to testing within that group, and obviously that presents challenges. So if that's the case for your organization, Kainos Smart again is a product that will hopefully you'll see in today's demonstration. It's very easy to use for someone with limited technical ability or limited test experience, but will still allow them to meet the needs of the testing that they need to complete. So what makes Kainos Smart unique then? The first thing is that Kainos Smart has been designed specifically for Workday. So there are generic test tools and products in the marketplace that can be used for, in their design, that they've been designed to be used for different applications and work against multiple things. But although that's an advantage in one sense, it's a disadvantage in another, in that you've got a very general set of functionality that you have to build out yourself. Kainos Smart has been targeted exactly at the requirements of the Workday customers and testing their specific implementations of Workday. We are hosted in the cloud, so Kainos Smart is a SaaS-based solution, and all that is good with that comes through Kainos Smart as well. So all of the benefits from being in the cloud in terms of picking up new functionality on an ongoing basis, the ability for us to maintain that rather than you having a hard install on site, and so on. All of those benefits that you currently get from Workday, you'll also get from Kainos Smart, given that it's hosted in the cloud as well. This is a very key point about Kainos Smart. So as I mentioned in relation to point 1, there are generic tool sets that can be used to build your own automation. The difference between those and Kainos Smart is that we have already pre-built the automation. As you know, Workday is on a single line of code, and every Workday customer sees the same set of screens and configures from the same building blocks that Workday provide to them. Now, what that means for Kainos is we can build a generic suite of automation that can then service all of our customers' needs. And because we can build one library of automation that services all clients, we can keep the price point extremely low. This is another key point and a key unique thing about Kainos Smart is that because of our relationship with Workday, we have early access to upcoming Workday functionality. So we currently have 25 Kainos employees who work as part of the internal QA function in Workday. And through that relationship, we have early access to the Workday development environment. So we see about 2 to 3 months in advance of your sandbox preview tenants being updated with the next version of Workday and the new functionality. We've already seen that. So when you take that in one hand and the pre-built automation that we've already developed in the other and combine them, it provides a very unique offering in that early access allows us to continually maintain and update the automation. So what that means for our clients is that 365 days a year, they've got automation that will always work against their version of Workday without any need for them to get into the technicalities of updating any automation. They may have to update their data as the data in their implementation changes over time, but the automation itself is all maintained by Kainos, as is evidenced in the last point. So as I mentioned, Kainos Smart is a SaaS-based solution. So whenever Kainos Smart executes, it's one cloud-based product talking to another. It can be connected to all of your non-production tenants. So if you're in the audience today and you are currently going through your Workday implementation, your initial implementation of Workday, you won't have any production tenants at this point, but Kainos Smart can still work against all of the tenants that you're carrying out your implementation testing in. And once you go into post-production life, you will have a sandbox preview tenant, a sandbox, and if you're a larger organization, you may have up to 3, 4, 5 additional implementation tenants that are used for different testing activities at different points in time. Kainos Smart can be connected to all of those tenants and will execute against all of those tenants as well. It utilizes Amazon Web Services, and your Smart instance will be hosted in the same jurisdiction as your Workday tenants. So for our European headquartered companies, they're hosted within our Dublin data center, and for our US customers who have their Workday tenants hosted in one of the US locations, we would then host their Smart instance within the US as well. So right now, anybody in the audience who isn't utilizing any automated testing or any automated test product to help with their Workday testing probably has a process something like the one on screen, where you would have your test scenarios and test cases, whatever the terminology you want to use, and those are documented in some form of spreadsheet or Word document, and a manual test team will sit down for a particular test event, lift those scenarios, open up a browser, navigate to their Workday tenant, and start automatically entering the data from those scenarios directly into the tenant. With Kainos Smart, you get the exact same output, except those scenarios are loaded into Kainos Smart through our data templates, and then Kainos Smart does all that work of execution and verification for you. So we have 3 modules of functionality in Kainos Smart at this particular time. The first one is a business process module, which allows you to automate the testing of your critical business processes in your Workday implementation. So things like create position, job requisition, hire, change job, comp change, termination, and so on. We also released last year our security module, and this was in direct reaction to requests from our client base at the time who were having challenges around testing their security configuration in Workday on an ongoing basis and having the ability to do that in an effective and efficient manner. So that module allows you to verify your security configuration in Workday on an ongoing basis without throwing a huge volume of manual test resources at it. And the third module is our integrations module, which can be used to kick off all of your integrations, and also during your Workday updates in post-production life, there's a comparison feature that will line by line and file by file compare the contents of integration outputs from Sandbox Preview and Sandbox to verify that everything is still working correctly with your integrations. And very soon we will be adding a fourth module to our offering, and that will be the Smart Financials product, or the Smart Financials module. In July of this year, we plan to release version 1 of Financials, which will address the core business processes within the financials modules of Workday. So that's something that we're very excited to release in the coming months. So very quickly, before I move into our the functional demonstration, I just wanted to share with you some of our Kainos Smart customers to date. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've added 5 new customers to our existing customer base. So you'll see there that there's organizations across all industry sectors, from commercial to education and government, and organizational size from less than 1,000 employees to over 100,000 employees. So I'm now ready to move into the functional demonstration part of this presentation. And as I said a little earlier, I'm going to keep this at a relatively high level. After this webinar, if any of the attendees would like to go through a more in-depth demonstration of the functionality, I'd be more than happy to arrange a session. I want to give you a bit of context in terms of the functionality, and then spend most of the remaining time talking with Christopher, because I think you'll get great benefit from hearing about his experiences on the State of Maryland implementation, and also his experiences with Kainos Smart. So I am just going to go into our Kainos Smart demo environment. So every new customer that signs up for Kainos Smart is provided with their own unique Smart instance, and they would access that by their own unique URL. So for example, if this was using our own company here, Kainos as an example, this would be kainos.kainossmart.com. We set up each client with an initial administrator account, and then our professional services team will engage with the client as part of the onboarding process to set up all of the users that particular customer needs, and connect it to all of the Workday tenants they need to execute testing against. So I'm going to sign in here as myself on our test tenant and talk you through some of the functionality. So the My Test Run screen is the first screen that any user that logs into Kainos Smart arrives on, and it's basically just a history of all the testing that's been executed by that particular user in the past. So before I go into the actual demonstration or the functionality, my background is actually as a test manager in Kainos here for about 8 years before I got involved in the Kainos Smart product. So taking a step back from automation and thinking about the tasks that you need to complete for any test event, they always boil down to 3 basic tasks that need to be completed. The first one is you need to create your test scenarios or test cases, again, whatever terminology is used in your organization. The second one is you need to execute those tests. And the third one is you need to verify that what actually happened in the system is what you expected to happen. So taking the first one of those in isolation, creating test scenarios, we've developed what we call wizard-based test cases, which is effectively a UI tool that will interact with your tenant in real time and help you to build out your test scenarios for business processes and security. So I'm going to go through a simple example for the request one-time payment process, and this particular definition I'm working against has a basic step condition that states one-time payments below $10,000 require a single approval, of $10,000 and above will require a secondary approval. So those are the three scenarios I'm going to build out to demonstrate the functionality. You can see that I select a tenant here, so if you have multiple tenants configured, then those will appear in this drop-down. In our demo environment here, I've got a single tenant here, and this is one of our Kainos partner tenants, which is a GMS tenant. So you'll recognize the data in here as the data you would have seen during your Workday training, Logan McNeil, Betty Lou, and so on. So I'm going to start to build my test data here. And for the one-time payment process, the first piece of information I'm asked for is who's going to be the initiator of this process. And I may want to enter here, based on the initiating security groups that have been set up in the business process, someone from one of those groups, or if I wanted to run a negative scenario, I'd select someone that wasn't in one of those groups. But for the positive scenario I'm going to enter, I'm going to go for Betty Lou. So the next thing I'm asked for is who's going to be the recipient of the one-time payment. And again, you'll see that this is dynamically interacting with the GMS tenant. If we were connected to your own tenant, it would be your employees that are returned in this search. So let's select Adam Carlton. And then I'm prompted to enter the data for the particular one-time payment scenario. So I'm going to first enter an effective date, and let's go for Monday. And you'll see at this point that that's a hard-coded date. Now what we want our clients to have the ability to do is set up their test collateral once and then have it in a reusable format. Now if I left that as a hard-coded date and this test was re-executed in 3 months' time or 6 months' time or even next year, that transaction in Workday would become more and more out of date whenever it's executed. So we give you the ability to use a parameterized date format. So with the parameterized date format, whenever you re-execute this in 3 months or 6 months or whatever, today will equal the date of test execution, and it will set the effective date of the one-time payment in your Workday tenant to the date of execution. And as you can see on screen, it'll add 4 days to that. So for example, if we executed this test on the 1st of September, the one-time payment would be committed in the Workday tenant with an effective date of September 5th. These one-time payment plans are dynamically retrieved from the tenant, so it would be populated with your one-time payment plans. And the beauty of that is that in one place you can make the decision of whether you want to test all of your one-time payment plans, some of them or one of them, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to select the signing bonus, and then I'm going to enter the amount. So as I said there, I want to do 3 boundary scenario tests, one below, one on the threshold, and one above the $10,000 threshold. So this one is going to be below. So I'm going to enter 9,999 and set our currency and then hit next. I've entered all the data required to process that one-time payment at this point. I then enter a description of the test, a test case ID for tracking and reporting, and most important of all, what's our expected result. And if you're utilizing proxy within your tenants, you can run through proxy by checking that box. Alternatively, Smart can work if proxy isn't configured in your tenants either. So when I hit add test case, you'll see that it drops into the basket on the right hand side. Now at this point, you can go back through the wizard and add another scenario and another scenario into the basket to the point where you've entered all of the scenarios you need to. How our clients typically use this functionality is they will use the wizard to create a number of vanilla test scenarios, and then they'll hit generate. And what you'll see here is that one of our smart data templates is automatically generated containing the data from the wizard. So if I can quickly talk through this and explain what is contained in here. So these columns A to E contain the reference data that our automation uses to drive through your Workday tenant. What step in the process am I on? What field am I working against, and what type of field is it? And you'll recognize that this is the data we entered into the wizard. Now if you think there about how I said our clients use this, they'll use the wizard to create some vanilla scenarios, and then what they will do is they will start copying and pasting these and changing the individual pieces of data to suit the needs of the tests they want to execute. So I need 3 scenarios here. I created the below the boundary scenario through the wizard. I now want to create one on the boundary, which I've done there, and one above the boundary. Update our ID and then our expected results as well. So I'd be expecting 2 approvals here because I'm on the threshold, and here as well I'd be expecting 2 approvals because I'm above. Now there's other changes that you may want to make there based on your particular configurations, and you can very easily make them here. If I wanted to backdate a one-time payment, a current dated one-time payment scenario, I can do that. If I want to change the recipient, I can very easily do that. If I wanted to run a negative scenario to make sure that Adam couldn't give himself a one-time payment, I can easily achieve that as well by setting Adam Carlton as both the initiator of the business process and the recipient. So whatever you need to do, you can copy and paste and add as many columns as you need to for the particular scenarios that you need to execute for that particular business process. This template would then be saved off to a local directory, ready to be uploaded for execution. So we've completed for the one-time payment process at this point the first one of those 3 tasks in creating our scenarios. We're now ready to set up our test run, and it's very straightforward in Kainos Smart. What I'm first going to do is set up a very straightforward test run, testing an individual business process, and it's those 3 scenarios that I created by the wizard for the one-time payment. So I upload the template that I just created by the wizard, name the test run, and save it. And the last thing I need to do to execute is point it at the tenant I want to execute against and specify whether I want that to kick off now or schedule it for later. So I'm going to execute this now, and we can see that that has started. So while that's executing, what I quickly want to do is just come back in to our presentation deck here. So when I've engaged with clients, an illustrative tool that we use to help clients visualize what's actually happening in the cloud whenever you hit that execute button is this video. So what Smart will do is it'll open up a browser in the cloud, navigate to the Workday tenant we are executing against, and automatically log in as the person we specified as the initiator in the spreadsheet. And it'll start automatically entering the data from the spreadsheet directly through the UI into your Workday tenant. Now because it's automation, it's extremely quick. So as soon as that page loads in Workday, that data is going to be getting dropped in there. There's a deliberate pause coming up in this video in a second, and that's to show you how Kainos Smart gets from one step in a process to the next one. So you can see here that we're currently logged in as Steve Morgan. Smart will read 2 things back from the Workday tenant during execution. What's the next step in the process and who's responsible for executing it. And you can see here that it's Assign Organizations and Logan McNeil. So Smart will either log out of Steve's account and log in as Logan McNeil, or if you're using proxy, it'll just proxy in as Logan. And it'll pick up the Assign Organizations tab from Logan's work feed and continue automatically entering the data from the spreadsheet directly into the Workday tenant. And that process of reading the next step, entering the data from the spreadsheet into the tenant will continue until either the business process completes successfully or it encounters some type of error. And I'll show you examples of both positive and negative scenarios a little later on. Now the true beauty of Smart is in that it executes one test really quickly. For every column in that spreadsheet, it'll open up a separate browser in the cloud, and at the same time it'll kick off all of those tests. So through that power of concurrency and those concurrent execution, it will execute a huge volume of testing way beyond what you could possibly achieve with a manual test team, and that's where the real benefit of Kainos Smart is going to start coming in for your organizations. So if I come back into Kainos Smart here, we can see that these particular tests are starting to complete. We track results at 2 levels. The execution status as well as the business process has got past the defined completion step, and the result is the verification of the expected result against the actual. So we can see here for this first example, I'm expecting 1 approval because it was $9,999, so below the threshold. And when I look at the log, I can see exactly what happened in the workday tenant. Betty Lou was the initiator as we set in the spreadsheet. We got our first approval by the HR executive, who is Helene Benoit, and the second approval wasn't required because we were below the threshold. If we look at the second and third examples then, where we're expecting 2 approvals, we can see that again initiated by Betty Lou. We have our first approval because we're on the threshold, and we also have our second approval here by the compensation partner. So the step condition has been met and the second approval was entered. And just for completeness, we can have a look at the log for the third one. And again, above the threshold, we can see the second approval, so we know that our step condition configuration has been set up correctly, and then we would set our results accordingly. So that's an example of a very straightforward test run for business processes. Now you can set up far more complex examples. And when you get into end-to-end test scenarios, you'll want the output from one business process transaction to be the input to the next, and you can very easily set those up as well. For example, you can create positions, hire people into the positions you just created, and then run some employee lifecycle business processes on those. Again, in turn, you would upload the spreadsheet specific to containing the scenario specific to the business process. And if you want to run a true end-to-end test where that transactional data that comes out of one business process inputs to the next, we allow you to do that using our sequence functionality. And this works the exact same way as the business process steps in your workday. So simply using alphabetical characters, we will order the execution. So what I'm telling Smart here to do is execute the positions first, and only when those are completed do you then start the hires. Run all of the hires into Workday, and only when they're completed can you then start these business processes. Now, because there's no dependency between these particular business processes, I can put the same character C against all of them, and that means that they will all execute at the same time. If you want to run an end-to-end test where you have, say for example, a third-party payroll integration kicked off, you can also add that on to the end, and as well as putting those business process transactions through, you can verify that that transactional data appears in your integration output file. That particular example I pre-executed a little bit earlier to save us some time. So if I just take us into that, and this is the example here. So we can see we created the positions first, and then our hires and comp changes and so on. Now, I showed you some positive scenarios earlier on that we expected to complete. So what happens if we don't expect something, if something inadvertently fails or unexpectedly fails? So what you see here is an example of we were expecting 2 approvals here, and we got the result that it failed to complete. If we have a look at the log, we can see exactly what happened. Pedro Santiago initiated the one-time payment. We got our first approval by Logan McNeil, who is the compensation partner, and then it failed on the second approval by the bonus approver. So in any instance of failure, what Kainos Smart will do is take a screenshot of your tenant at the point of failure to give you context for verifying your actual result against your expected result. And hopefully in the screenshot you can see here, I know it's probably coming across a little bit small, but we're logged in as Logan McNeil currently, and Smart's trying to read back from the tenant what's the next step in the process and who's responsible for it. And you can see that there's an unassigned task there. So Smart will also give you an explanation as to why that issue is happening. And as you can see here, it's because no one in that supervisory org has been assigned to the role of bonus approver. So we would then go correct that configuration and re-execute that test. So that's an example of an unexpected failure. Alternatively, you may want to run some negative scenarios. For example, if you are testing your absence plans, very often the bulk of the testing in relation to absence plans is making sure that people don't have access to particular types of leave that they shouldn't have based on their particular setup in Workday or a particular scenario that you're trying to execute. So this first example here is a female employee who's requesting maternity leave but has less than 6 months continuous service and therefore should not be entitled to that particular type of leave. So we want to verify two things from that test case. The first one is the error triggered as we would expect, and the second one is the configurable message that we are expecting to show on screen the actual one that's getting shown on screen. So we can see first of all that it failed. Our expected result was that we were expecting a failure. So let's just have a look at the log to see exactly what happened. Tommy Calhoun requested a leave of absence, and it was maternity leave. And again, in the screenshot, we can see that the error was triggered, and it's the message that we configured. So continuous service less than or equal to 6 months, and it's a female employee, and therefore not entitled to it. And that very often makes up the bulk of your testing. One of our clients who's in a lot of countries worldwide has something like 1,020 unique scenarios they need to execute for the verification of their absence plan setup. And obviously that would be a huge manual effort to achieve that, but through the use of a tool like Kainos Smart, you can achieve it in a fraction of the time and far more efficiently. As well as that, once you have your collateral set up once, if you want to reuse that for a future test event, say the next Workday update, or as a regression test for a change that you make, you can simply re-execute and edit the name, because in Kainos Smart we don't ever want to overwrite results that are there, because we want you to have a full audit history of all the testing that you've executed from the time you take up your subscription to the time that that ends. So you can see that that's going to re-execute now. The last thing I want to run through with you very quickly is our security functionality. Again, it's the exact same principle. You go through the wizard to create our scenarios. So if we set up some available action security, which is object-to-object security, we start to build our test data. We're prompted for whose security are we going to check. So let's go for Betty again. What object type in Workday are we going to check Betty's access against? So if we select, say, for example, a worker, we're asked for who that worker is. So we're going to check Betty's access to the related actions of Mark Navarro, and then using this drop-down, we can start building up a picture of what Betty's access should be. Let's say, for example, we can add the compensation ones, and very shortly we'll be making this a multi-select drop-down. And then using the checkbox here, we specify whether Betty should have access to that related action or should not. If she does have access, we make it visible. If she does not have access, we leave it unchecked. When I hit next, the last thing I'm prompted for is a test case ID, and I add that to the basket. Again, we would generate that data template. Now what our professional services team have done is they've analyzed the security groups within Workday, and they've pre-prepared some templates, and they will take those into our new clients as part of the onboarding process to very quickly get them to set up their security tests. And this is an example of one. So for this particular spreadsheet, we are checking against the same worker, but for different security groups and roles. So the HR partners access to Alain Dubois, and you can see here all of the access that they should have indicated by Y, or they should not have indicated by the N. And again, you have that for your absence partner within that supervisory organization and your comp pool manager, and so on and so forth. So you can keep building up the full picture of the access. That spreadsheet would then be uploaded for execution. Again, very straightforward process. You just add it to the run, upload the spreadsheet that we created via the wizard, name it, and save it. So to save us a little bit of time, I pre-executed that particular test run a little earlier, and this is the results here. So for our security tests, they are actually auto-verifying themselves, so there is no manual step to check the actual against the expected. So if we quickly have a look at here, we can see that 7 passed and 2 failed. If we have a look at this first one that passed, and this is the spreadsheet that I showed you a little bit earlier. So Logan McNeil and her access to the worker object Alan Dubois. The expected column here contains all of the Y's or N's that we entered into the spreadsheet, and when Smart executes, it performs every one of those data checks and verifies that what actually happened matched what we expected to happen. And for each one of those, if it matches exactly, it'll mark it as passed. If every one of those particular checkpoints is passed, then the overall test is automatically marked as passed. And just the same way as I showed you for the business processes, if there is an instance of failure, like here where Betty Lou checking against Alan, and we specified in the spreadsheet that Betty should not have access to assigned future payment plans, Smart found that she actually did and took a screenshot as evidence of that. So we can see here, proxied in as Betty Lou, looking at Alan Dubois, and she does indeed have access to the assigned future payment plans. So you can very quickly build up, according to our professional services team, in probably 2 to 3 days, you can build up nearly all of your scenarios to test your security configuration. You can put those into one reusable suite, which I've done here, and reuse that suite on an ongoing basis. So if you make a configuration change to your security and want to see the impact of that, you would simply come in, re-execute your full suite. What some of our clients do is, in reaction to the weekly patches, they will have these queued up to execute on a Sunday at 4 p.m. local time. And while everybody's at home, Kainos Smart, after the patch has been applied to production and their sandbox tenant, will go in, run those tests, and each organization can see before they arrive into work on Monday whether their security configuration has got affected by the weekly patch. And that gives you a very efficient way of verifying your security configuration in Workday on an ongoing basis. Now, that's as much of the sort of walkthrough of the functionality I wanted to get through. At this point, what I want to do is start talking with Christopher. Again, I'll re-emphasize, so if anyone wants to set up another session to go through the functionality in a lot more detail, I'd be more than happy to do that. So firstly, what I'd like to do is invite Christopher to introduce himself and maybe explain his role in the state of Maryland.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Christopher.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Straub. I am the Quality Assurance and Testing Lead for the project that's being done for the state of Maryland. We've got 3 phases to the project. We're currently in phase 2. So that's what my role and what we're doing at the state of Maryland currently at a very high level.
Okay, thanks, Christopher. So, Christopher, could you tell us a little bit about the complexities of the state of Maryland implementation, and maybe give us some input on any of the challenges you faced, how you maybe addressed those in your test strategy, and for my own selfish purposes, maybe talk a little bit about how you specifically addressed those through the use of Kainos Smart.
Sure. There's with any sort of government, there's different challenges. What we found that with the state of Maryland in particular was current HR challenges, in the sense that you can have employees working multiple jobs or working in an acting capacity type of situation. It's normally unusual, at least it's been my experience, that that's an unusual situation for the private industry. But for the public sector, it's my understanding that that is quite, it's not as unique. So there were challenges to that where we had to very much set and configure the Workday product to work within the guidelines as set forth either by regulation. I albeit a state regulation or federal regulation or state law or federal law that had to be followed. In addition, there were also, and I'm sure your clients or the people that are thinking about using this tool, there's union considerations to take into account with that on how you handle or manage your employees under your union contracts. So you have to wrap that all in. In addition to those types of situations, we have, I think the state of Maryland has around 120 agencies or something like that, where no two can be the same in some ways. So managing those processes for those individual agencies can be quite the challenge as well.
Great. And were there any particular challenges in terms of preparation as you come into end-to-end testing on your initial implementation?
Absolutely. With an HCM suite implementation, such as what we're doing, where you have, and our organization is not overly large, Rory. We only have about 50,000 active employees, but we have over 150,000 retirees that must be managed as well. So the challenges we were facing in implementation phase 1 was that the testing was only given about 6 weeks from the time we got our hands on the Kainos tools to the time we began end-to-end testing or system testing to complete that. And then a very brief period of about 1 week at the end of system testing to resolve issues, retest those areas that need to be retested, and then we moved right into user acceptance testing. So it was quite a challenge to get all of that accomplished in that short of a time frame.
I think you're selling yourself a little bit short there, Christopher. 50,000 employees is a fairly sizable organization in anybody's estimation, I think.
Yes.
So just in relation to your strategy for testing, I know that you utilized a very effective risk-based testing approach. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that would be of great benefit to all of the attendees in the audience.
Sure, absolutely. What we did here at the State of Maryland, we started with our business process diagrams. This is where you lay out the process of, let's say, a hire, and you define the swim lanes of the individual players or actors within that process. Within that, you've defined who's doing what. We took those, broke those down further as to the requirements for each process or decision within that box, who has to do it, what's to be done, what data should be a part of that, et cetera, et cetera. From there, we actually put priorities at the process level, and then within the process level itself, define priorities for that. We also went through and identified risks associated to the process and to the sub-processes within that, meaning that, so for the sake of argument, if the hire process is an extremely complex or something that had a high probability of being configured incorrectly in some way or needed to be checked that much thoroughly, we gave it a very high ranking in the risk. Between the risk probability and our priority for testing, it helped us identify very, very quickly. We could filter. We had all of this in a spreadsheet. We could very, very quickly filter in and key in on those top priorities and top risks and knock those out very, very quickly using the Kainos tool.
Excellent. And I know that you also use Smart in a very inventive way that we certainly didn't originally design it for, and that was in relation to freezing positions. So could you maybe give us a bit of background on that?
Correct. With the state and federal government, and I haven't had any exposure to this prior to coming to this, but budgets are frozen from year to year until the congressional or the legislature approves the budget submitted by the state or by the federal government. Here at the State of Maryland, what they required is that all positions, all open positions, those positions that didn't currently have anybody sitting in that position, that they'd be frozen. So what we did is we just took the Kainos tool, using the using the business process, the manage position process, we froze those positions. We just loaded up the position identification numbers, put in an effective date, and marked that position as frozen. With that, we were able to, within 20 minutes, freeze 3,500 to 4,000 positions.
Excellent, and that's something that we love seeing from our customers, is taking the functionality and applying it in a very different way that we've never thought about. So as you can tell, I know you're going through a phased rollout with State. If you could maybe give us a bit of detail on how you plan to use Smart as you continue with that phased rollout.
Absolutely. Right now we're in the second part, or phase 2, of the implementation, and this is going to deal with the benefits side. And right now we're tearing apart, I should say tearing apart, but we're taking a hard look at the requirements that the state of Maryland has for the varied and many benefit plans they offer to its employees. And that's not just your active employees, it's also your retirees or survivors of beneficiaries. And the state has certain laws and regulations that they allow dependents or spousals, if a retiree or an employee were to pass away during their service, that they can be offered those benefits. So we're taking apart the different types of requirements that they have. And just to give you an idea, Rory, what we're looking at just for life insurance, okay, the various combinations that we came up with for testing life insurance, if we wanted to test every single situation, is 24,000 test cases that could be had with just life insurance. So,
yeah, you might need a life insurance policy just for that testing.
Correct. Could be an all-year thing, but now that we have an automated tool, and as Roy has alluded to in his presentation, we can take those 24,000. Chances are we won't run all 24,000, but we'll probably do a very high number of those, between 5 to 10,000. But we can quickly duplicate those scenarios over and over and over again using Kainos Smart. And the time saving on that is going to be incredible for us. So.
Yep. And I know I went through some of the new security functionality in Kainos Smart there, and that's something that you are going to be starting to look at now and starting to implement. So,
correct.
Could you give us a bit of background on what in specific, specifically for State of Maryland, what are you hoping to achieve out of the use of your security, the security functionality in Smart?
We're already taking a look at the roles as defined for the state of Maryland. So we have these different HR coordinators, partners, and then we've also included some appointing authority partners and some just very much different roles, and that's just on the HR side. Now that we're moving into the benefits side, we're going to have what I call the dual roles, where an HR coordinator is also considered the agency benefits coordinator. So how do we handle that? Well, Kainos Smart, once we get it configured into the Workday product and it's released in the tenant, we'll point the Smart product at it and then just start throwing some situations to where positive and negative testing can occur, and we can prove that the configuration works as we need it to, or show where it doesn't work and what needs to change in order to make it work for the state of Maryland.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, one of the things that I'm very often asked about when I'm out visiting with potential clients, Christopher, is how the relationship with our professional services team works, and given that some of those people are based in the UK and there's the time zone difference, is there any impact off the back of that? So could you maybe talk us through how your interaction with the professional services team went, and whether there was actually any impact off the the different time zones?
There was, and only in the sense that we planned for it, and we knew that we were going to be running some of the heavier volume tests later on the evening when normally people would not be at the office or in a place to where they could respond to us if we needed to get some sort of an answer or somebody to take a look at a problem we were having with the tool. So I planned well in advance with the Kainos Smart team on who would be the point of contact for support during this specific time frames. And when we did that, it was never an issue, Rory, to get any sort of support from you or your team to help us through any of the problems we were facing.
That's great. And you know, in terms of functionality or enhancements that you might have wanted, do you feel that Kainos were fairly reactive into building in new things? I know that the parameterized date format was something that you had asked for at one point.
Well, that has been a huge time saver, and Rory's already talked about this, but with some of these parameterized dates and information that you can provide in your spreadsheets or in your test cases using the Smart tool, you don't have to revisit it. You already know that you sent, as Rory gave an example of, you just set it to today's date, and if you run it 6 months from now, it's going to pick up that date from today 6 months from now. So Smart has done and continues to improve the product so that, one, it's easier for the users to execute their test cases or test scenarios, and two, reuse those things down the line or in the future. So very important types of things that Kainos has thought about and is integrating now and future releases for future use of the tool.
Thanks very much for that, Christopher. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm conscious that we're running, with about 6 minutes to go. So before I finish up with you, Christopher, do you think is there anything else that we haven't covered, but you think would be worth sharing with anybody that's attending the presentation today?
Absolutely. Let me pass this on to your customers that are either on or your potential customers. I can't stress this enough. Plan up front to spend a great deal of time for your data mining. Once you have your test cases, your test scenarios defined, begin your data mining efforts. Once you start your data mining effort, you're going to be surprised at how much time that takes you to pull all the data together to execute all of your scenarios. So make sure you build enough time into your project schedules to allow for that. The testing, once you have all of that, your execution is going to be very quick. And within a few days, you can get results that would take you weeks of manual testing to do. So plan on a lot of time for data mining.
Excellent point, Christopher. I guess perfect planning makes perfect projects.
Yes.
Christopher, thanks very much for talking along with me today. I just want to again emphasize, it's great to have someone from one of our customers talking so well about us. I know you're working very closely with our team and we'll continue to do that. So thanks very much, Christopher, for your participation today.
Not a problem.
Jill, maybe if I could hand back to you to see if there's been any questions that have come in from the audience during the presentation.
Thank you very much, Rory. And we have got questions in. And our first question here is from Richard. If my company already has licenses for a generic automated test tool, how would I build a compelling business case for Kainos Smart?
Great question, Richard, and it's something that I do encounter when I'm talking to new clients, and it's back to the points that I made at the start of the presentation. With any of those generic testing tools, you have to invest the time and effort in building out the automation suite, and if you've got a test tool, you've got resources within your organization that know how much effort is required to build out any particular automation. So with Kainos Smart, because we've already pre-built the automation, you are getting a huge cost benefit versus trying to build something out manually. And the other point is that because Workday is a SaaS-based solution and it evolves at such a rapid rate, and you're getting all that benefit from the new functionality pushed out by Workday, that puts to build your own automation and then continue to update it would be hugely costly for any organization and effectively impossible, because for the Workday updates you've got a 5-week window to execute your test, and so by the time you updated any automation, that 5-week window would basically be gone and the functionality would be pushed to production without you having the opportunity to test. Again, with Kainos Smart, because we have the pre-built functionality and the early access to the upcoming Workday functionality, that takes that off the table. So on the same weekend, your sandbox preview tenant will be updated with the next version of Workday. On that same weekend, we'll be updating Kainos Smart with the functionality to work with that new version of Workday. And that's just something that you're not going to be able to achieve with the generic test tool. So that's really the core part of any of the business case that you may need to make.
Thank you very much. And moving on to our next question here from Samuel. How long did it take to get up and running with Kainos Smart?
Typically what we see, Samuel, is somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks. That's 6 to 8 weeks, not 68 weeks. I'm conscious of my accent. So about 6 to 8 weeks after contract signature, we would have a new client up and running with Kainos Smart. So there's a 20-day professional services engagement that would take place across that time period, where we would get your tenant set up, come in for some on-site training. That's typically a 3 to 4 day on-site training course, and then work in partnership with you to build out your initial suite of tests in Kainos Smart. And at the end of that 20-day engagement, which sometimes takes between 6 and 8 weeks because of scheduling issues, at the end of that engagement, you would be pretty much self-sufficient and ready to move forward with Kainos Smart and expand your suite as you need to.
Thank you very much. And next question here is from George. What does the pricing model for Kainos Smart look like, and how would I go about getting a quote?
First of all, the pricing model, it's basically priced off the number of, so the FSE calculation that you go through for your Workday subscription, we use that same model, and we have pricing brackets based on the number of FSEs that you've calculated within your Workday tenant. We then bracket that into tranches of 10,000. So we actually have a 0 to 3,000 tranche, then 3 to 10,000, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and so on. And depending on what bracket you fall into, we have a price associated with each of those brackets. And obviously, as you move the further up the brackets you move, then the price point would increase accordingly. In terms of getting a quotation, I'm more than happy to, if you just want to drop me through an email with your details to that address, I can pick up with you and give you a quick call, and we can talk about getting a quotation out once I get a few details from you. Jill, I'm sort of conscious of the time. I know there may be some other questions there, but we can pick those up and respond to everybody who's entered a question, and we will be doing that over the next day or two. So rest assured, if I didn't get a chance to address your question on the webinar here, I will get back to you via email.
Thank you very much. So it just leaves it to me to say thank you, Rory and Christopher, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Testing Through Implementation and Beyond. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kainos Smart and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.